Welcome to the Man on the Street Show, where I bring you news, sports, entertainment, and politics. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to jump into politics. So this is the person that Donald Trump want to hire in a top position in the State Department?
What do you say?
Tell me how you define white identity and what you think is being erased about white identity.
Certain types of Anglo-derived culture that comes from our history.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Let me think about this. Senator, I would say if you were to look at the book by one of your former Senate colleagues, Born Fighting, about the sort of Scotch-Irish military culture and certain, pride that went with that, that would be one example. Obviously, you can have sub-elements of that culture. You could have Italians, you could have Irish.
You don't say.
You're worried about white culture. You're not worried about, you're now retreating to ethnic identity. You don't speak about ethnic identity. You speak about white identity.
Yep.
And that make it different than black identity.
I would say that the white church is very different than the black church in terms of its tone and style on average. Foodways could often be different.
Oh, really?
And those
music could be different.
And those are being erased.
Music could be different. Well, if you look at the Super Bowl halftime show, which was not in English this year.
So our ability to access white churches or white food or white music is being erased?
I am concerned with the majority common American culture that we had for some time that through particularly mass immigration, I think has become much more balkanized, and I think that weakens us. And again, I'm not running away from that comment. I'm not apologizing for it.
Well, I'm way over my time. I think you're struggling to answer this question, right? Because underlying your beliefs is a sentiment that white culture is just simply better.
Yeah, Mr. Murphy, I totally agree with you. That's what he's saying. He's basically saying that white culture is better than every other culture out here in America. If you don't conform to what we're doing or what we want you to do, well, you're wrong.
He ain't lying.
That's why he brought up the situation with the Super Bowl halftime show with Bad Bunny. Oh, he spoke in Spanish. Well, you do have 40 million Americans that speak Spanish here in the U.S., and then you have people around the world that speak Spanish as well.
So what are you saying?
He's saying that white identity is being lost and the culture of white people as well.
You don't say.
But now that y'all have to compete with other cultures, oh, we are losing ours.
Mr. Carl, I'll follow up a little bit. You gave a speech to the National Conservatism Conference in July of 2024 entitled On the Persecution of Whites in America, and one of the things you said was American whites are victims of a cultural genocide.
What?
So you'd agree with me, wouldn't you, that whites are pretty well represented in the United States Senate?
They are well represented in this body, yes, Senator.
And how about in the House of Representatives?
Senator Kaine, I don't have those particular numbers, however.
But you would agree that they're pretty well represented in the House of Representatives?
Senator, I would, again, thank you for the question. I would point out that there were no white Protestants by birth in the 25 cabinet members under Joe Biden.
How about in the ranks of American presidents throughout history, including now, pretty well represented whites?
Senator.
And how about in the ranks of vice presidents during American history now? Whites pretty well represented in that group, right?
Senator, thank you again for the question.
Yeah. I don't think it's hard. How about on the United States Supreme Court? Throughout our history and including now, whites are pretty well represented on the United States Supreme Court, correct?
Senator, will you permit me an opportunity to finish my answer? I think obviously historically, I would of course agree with you. Of course, the vast majority of Americans were white at that time. It's now a much more diverse society.
Let's focus on right now. How about in the ranks of American governors? You think whites are pretty well represented?
Senator, thank you for that question. I would just have to look at the numbers. I don't know.
Okay, how about this? In the ranks of CEOs of major corporations today, let's not talk about today. You think whites are pretty well represented?
Senator, thank you for the question. I suspect that they are probably pretty well represented in that. But there are other areas where they're not as well represented.
How about in the ranks of high-income people? And we can define it however you want. Let's just say like top 10% of wealthy Americans. You think whites are pretty well represented?
Senator, thank you for the question. They would certainly be underrepresented with respect to Asian Americans, but they would be overrepresented with respect to other groups.
Yeah. So, a cultural genocide, that's a stiff claim. And it's an interesting one because it's kind of a white victimhood argument, but if I remember my colleague, Senator Rosen, she was reading comments to you where you had been saying, man, Jews play the victim. Jews like to be the victim. And yet you're making a claim that whites are victimized by a cultural genocide when all the statistics would say, not just in history, but today, that whites are very well represented at every level of every institution. They're very well represented in the incomes of Americans. And that doesn't mean each person is high income or each person is a Supreme Court justice, but you could look institution after institution in this country, and the facts completely rebut the notion that whites are victimized by a cultural genocide.
So it's asinine for him to say that the white identity and white culture is being lost when they are still in power.
Ain't that the truth?
It seems as though that the average white male is scared of competition. And that's what it sounds like to me when he's talking. You had a 400-year start against African Americans here in America and other races as well. But now that you have to compete, you feel as though that your culture and identity is being pushed to the back of the bus. Well, welcome to America and how other races felt for all these years. Now that you have to compete to be number one, you feel threatened. Why is that? Because everything was handed to you on a silver platter?
Everything they meant to harm other people is now turning back onto them.
Now they are playing by your rules when y'all say, pull yourself up by your bootstring. Oh, their favorite word now is what? DEI hire.
That's right.
Now that the playing field is even, you feel as though that you're being left behind. And that's not the case. We are playing by your rules. We are playing by the rules that the white government and the white power structure put out there. And other races are now winning. But you can't have that.
Yeah, I heard that too.
You always got to be the one in power. And when the white man loses his power, he feels as though he's losing his dignity. And like you just say, your identity and your culture. So let me know down in the comments on what y'all thought about what I said. And Mr. Jeremy Carl said as well. The man on the street wants to know.